Hi, good morning. Welcome to day 4 of Fortunate Son. It's raining here in Los Angeles, and it looks like it's going to rain for the next 3 days. And there's nothing I love more than writing when it's raining in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, it only rains here when it gets super cold, so because the thing I really like to do is open the door so I can listen to the rain when I'm writing, but it gets super cold, so unfortunately you can't have everything, I guess. So anyway, I'm really excited. If you've been singing along, which I know only a masochist would do, but if you have been, you know that the keg has been loaded with gunpowder, which is the entire purpose of the first act, is to build the keg, first of all, and then mix the powder, and then pack it in, and then light the spark, which is what I did the last thing I wrote yesterday. And so now, today, what's going to happen is the fuse is going to burn, and it's going to burn right up to the keg. And I'll probably stop at that point because, as I mentioned to you, I really like to leave something on the table so that I can come into the next day just with vim and vigor, so to speak. So I'll probably let it burn right up to the keg, and when things are about to explode, I'll probably stop, and then tomorrow we'll watch the fireworks. And truthfully, this is almost the entire reason that I write, is to create these bombs, in one sense, and in some sense, I'm like most of us, I'm a relatively powerless person. So, the one way that I can take my revenge on people who do things like this in this script, which is, in this particular instance, take out predatory loans on disabled American veterans, which is something that really pisses me off, and I'm pretty sure it pisses everybody in this country off, and probably everybody in the world. The only thing I can really do is write a screenplay about it, and um, uh, kick those motherfuckers' asses with no better way to say it, I think. And so the fuse is going to be burning today. I'm going to burn that fuse, and tomorrow we're going to watch the fireworks, and then from here on out it should be absolute mayhem, and I'm excited about that. I hope you are too. Let's get down to it. Day 4, Fortunate Son. Hi, so it might interest you to know, another reason I love screenwriting is because I learn so much. I don't go on vacations really. Uh, I would love to see the world, but it's so big and there's so many things to see. How do you pick? But every time I write a screenplay, I essentially go on a journey someplace. And thank God for the internet. It's an enormous tool, obviously. But I learned so many things, and I sort of go into these worlds. Like, for instance, I read a lot of books about disabled vets, or vets who've had combat injuries, which is very eye-opening and very interesting. And you can't see it here, but I have maybe you can. I have an iPad right here, and occasionally I'm constantly referring to it with this keyboard for things that I don't know. Like, for instance, I just looked up, I know it sounds stupid, I said, what do you call the surgeon that works on muscles? It's an orthopedic surgeon, but I couldn't pull that out of my hat. But I'm constantly researching little things and sort of filling in details as I go along, and of course when I go back, I learn about the story as it happens, and I get to know the characters as they grow. So I never really start out knowing what a character, the characters that I write generally don't have peculiarities. Um, they're not unique characters. I tend to write as everyman because I kind of feel like an everyman in terms of the way I think and the way I perceive the world. But also, it's a commercial decision because the more that I believe that you write for everybody in the audience, and every woman too, when I say every man, I mean everybody, the more you write in that voice, the more likely you are to have success, A, in selling the script, and A, in the movie being successful. And if what they feel is very much in line with what you feel, what I feel, then it's more likely to work and more likely to sell. But in any event, I just wanted to say, I'm constantly, usually when I'm not in this situation here, I would just be on my computer doing this research, but in this case I'm doing it on the iPad, so that I don't interrupt the flow of things here. But I'm constantly looking things up there, like what are jokes about mill about welders, for instance, or Army National Reservists. I mean, believe it or not, there actually are jokes about those people. I didn't make up some of those jokes. I'm not that smart. But, so I'm constantly referring to the internet to fill in gaps that I may not be able to fill in quite as quickly otherwise. But the important thing to me is to always keep moving. So, that said, let's keep moving. So I don't think I finished my thought earlier. It just occurred to me. Yeah, when I said, yeah, I don't know really the characters before I start. I meet them as you meet them. I meet them on the page, and just like kind of like when we meet people in real life, as you meet people, you don't always ask them a ton of questions. Sometimes you listen and you figure out things and you draw conclusions about them. And I do the same thing. And as I grow to know someone, I will go back and I will start to fill in holes. I will create their character. I don't create their character. I illuminate their character as I go on, but I will go backwards in time and fill in the questions I had about their character. So, but the point is I'm trying to make is uh, because I don't necessarily write about characters who are unique, whether they're, let's say they're schizophrenic or something, or had a very unique perspective on the world. I write some people that have a more ecumenical um, worldview. So the characters that I write actually are really pieces that function inside of the story in the best possible way. So, I select a character who will function and help me tell the story that I want to tell in the best possible way. And then as I go along, I will identify the unique characteristics that make this character um, different from everybody else, but yet while retaining that same sheen of sameness that allows them to be identifiable to hopefully the entire audience. I don't think I quite finished my thought on that before, but anyway, that's what I meant. And getting back to it, but you'll see as I go along, you'll see that usually the next day I'll go in and I'll add sentences to the earlier parts of the work, or I'll add tiny little scenes to the earlier parts of work that begin to reinforce the character as I've grown to know him or her in the course of the script. And it's not just the central character, it's every character. I learn about all of them as it goes along. And we haven't met the antagonist yet, not really. And I don't really know who it is, but we're going to find out. We're going to find out along with our character. And if I need to reinforce him as I go, I certainly will do it. And that's like a lot of the time I spend after I finish writing, which is really the most important part. The writing part is really just I don't know if you even call it the heavy lifting. It's just the expression of what's been going on in my mind between the last time I stopped writing and the time I started writing. That's really me committing it to paper. And so after I stop writing, I just go about my day and doing my things, but in the subconscious, everything's sort of boiling around in there. And there's lots and lots of ideas in no particular order, but they're there to use and exploit, theoretically, should I want them, when I sit down the next day. And so let's go see what happens. Let's see what happens. Okay, that was wildly inarticulate. Sorry. So I'm not saying that you don't have to know your character. In many senses, you do. I'm saying there are some senses, it's particularly in the granularity of the character. It's not necessary to know before you get started, because I think those sort of things can bog you down. Having a very good general sense of the character, and really more importantly, how the character is broken in such a way that the screenplay can fix them, that's important to know. That's essential. I mean, that's the entire point, right? That's the entire point of the journey. Um, every movie is about restoring equilibrium. Sometimes you start with equilibrium and then you break it, as I'm doing in this script, and then you restore equilibrium. Sometimes the character will come in with equilibrium already broken, and they walk into a situation that allows them to restore their own equilibrium, or there's someone to do it for them. Usually restore their own. But that's a very general thing. You know, it doesn't really deal with quirks of personality, and that's what I'm talking about. As you go along, or as I go along, it's perfectly fine, I think, to come to understand, because generally as people, we're quite similar. We react to things similarly, but it is the nuance and the minutia that separates us. And that's what I'm saying. So those colors that exist between the lines, I don't think you need to know them, and I don't know them when I start the screenplay. But as I get to know the character, I start to see the colors and the lines, and then I go back, and when I go back, I will start to color those colors in. And you'll see it, and the character starts to blossom from there. But the most important thing is, to me anyway, is that they function within the structure of the screenplay, the structure of the story that you are trying to tell, that they are the proper foil for the reality of the environment that they are fighting against. And usually, in my scripts anyway, they usually overcome. So that's that. Let's see what happens. Well, I accidentally shut down Final Draft, so I might as well say hello. Um, so, apropos of nothing, but it related to what I was talking about character, or the lack of detail thereof, earlier, and how I like to start with just a force vector of something that pushes through, something that's very clean, that doesn't get sidelined by minutia, because that's a very dangerous thing. I mean, a screenplay should be very pure things, very clear on every level. And unfortunately, that's a byproduct of people not really having patience. I mean, readers, you may create the most elegant and crystalline and beautifully intricate characters, but the sad truth of it is that people reading your scripts, the vast majority of them, they're going to be speeding through it. They're not going to see or appreciate the work you've done, and therefore they're not going to realize or understand the implications of it further on in the script, and then they're going to get confused, and you're going to think, unfortunately, they're going to think you're precious. So, in many ways, unfortunately, we have to pander to the audience that we're writing for, and in some senses, that means writing down to them. I go through enormous lengths to make everything extremely clear, just crystal clear, very, very simple on the page, easy to read, impossible not to read. Obviously, I'll never bunch up a huge amount of description, and description's an interesting thing to talk about, because it's interesting how the human brain processes words on a page. It is very difficult for almost all people, myself included, to process words on a page into visual material. Obviously, it can be done. And interestingly, it's most easily done in novel form. So we've all read novels, whether it's, say, let's call it Fellowship of the Ring or something like that, Lord of the Rings, and we've become immersed in the visual world that Tolkien created. But it takes time to sort of sink. You have to sink into a sort of different mental space, I believe, in order to achieve that. And I find that screenplays, the way they're written, the way they're structured, they never allow the reader to really sink into that warm space under the blanket, and that place where the mind is allowed to easily translate written words into visual information. So therefore, it becomes laborious for people to read visual description. So I minimize it, and I write only the things that are really important, only the things that will really jump out and grab people's attention and grab their mind, visually speaking. And it extends not just to that, but it also extends to detail. You'll notice if you read it that my scripts lack detail. And this is very intentional because, again, the readers aren't paying attention. Generally speaking, they're not paying attention to what you're writing. And you do yourself a disservice by overloading the pages with detail, because every inch of that page is a piece of real estate and it has value, and it must be leveraged to the greatest extent possible. So, for instance, when I describe something, I find that a lot of writers are very pleased with themselves when they give vivid descriptions of something. Like, let's say a dog, for instance. If I say the character has a dog, I only say he has a dog or she has a dog. And this is because if I describe the dog, if I say it's a Rottweiler or an English Wolfhound, there are people out there who are reading your script who will say, A, they're annoyed that they had to read that additional description because, they're cumulative over the course of the screenplay. But they'll be like, well, I don't like wolfhounds. I got bitten by a wolfhound when I was a kid. That may be extreme, it sounds extreme, but there's actually some truth to it. And so I find if I say he has a dog, the dog jumps in, and the dog's name, you can name the dog, but the dog jumps in the back seat. The audience will fill in for themselves what kind of dog it is. They automatically picture the dog of their choice, or the car of their choice, or the house of their choice, or the clothing or the suit of their choice, or the dress of their choice. If you don't try and tell them what to think, they'll think it for themselves, and they'll think it the way they want to think it. They'll think it the way that pleases them, the first thing that leaps into their mind. And you get credit for that as a savvy writer. They're like, oh, and the dog in that script, I love that dog, he was so cute. Well, you never described him. They did it for themselves. And so there's a lot of psychology that goes into screenwriting, and part of it is knowing what to tell, what you need to tell the reader, and it's a partnership, and what you allow them to tell themselves. So here we go. I think Final Draft hopefully is back up, and we can continue this journey this morning. Okay, party people. So that's it for today. For those of you who have been following along, it should be very, very clear what I'm doing now. I have lit the fuse. The fuse has reached the accelerant, the powder, the gunpowder, and tomorrow morning this thing is going off. And I don't know what's going to happen, but it's not going to be good for a lot of people. Again, it's going to be complete mayhem, and there's going to be a lot of pages that are soaked with blood because I'm very upset about, very upset about, very upset about big corporations making these predatory loans to disabled American veterans and using their monthly disability payments as security. I'm very upset about it. And again, I'm a powerless person in this world, but on these pages, these people are going to pay. And that's fundamentally why I write. Okay, so was it day 4? Fortunate Son, day 4. That's all she wrote. I'll see you tomorrow.